The first flakes had begun falling just after 4 in the morning, and by the time Margaret Holloway fired up Bus 14's engine at 5:30, the world had been transformed into something hushed and white. She'd been driving this route for 23 years, long enough to know every pothole, every cattle guard, every place where black ice liked to lurk beneath fresh powder. Long enough, too, to recognize the rhythms of the small farming community outside Whitmore, where children emerged from century-old farmhouses and trailer homes alike, breath misting in the cold, boots crunching on gravel driveways. And long enough to know Atlas. The German Shepherd had appeared 6 months ago in late summer, though no one seemed quite sure where he'd come from. He wore no collar, answered to no owner's call. Yet he was no stray in the pitiful sense of the word. His coat gleamed with health, his eyes were bright and alert, and he moved with the confident purpose of a dog with a job to do. His job, apparently, was Margaret's bus. It had started simply enough. One August morning, as she'd pulled up to the Kowalski place, third stop on the route, the Shepherd had been sitting at the end of the driveway, perfectly still, watching. When the Kowalski twins climbed aboard, the dog had stood, tail wagging slowly, and watched the bus pull away. The next morning, he'd been there again. And the next. By September, he'd expanded his routine. He'd be waiting at the Kowalski place, then trot alongside the bus as it continued down Maple Ridge Road, keeping pace for nearly half a mile, before sitting down at the turnoff to watch them disappear. The children adored him. They'd named him Atlas because he's always there, holding up our morning, 10-year-old Sophie. Chen had explained with the profound seriousness only a child could muster. They waved to him. They begged Margaret to stop so they could pet him, which she'd allowed exactly twice. After determining he was gentle and well-mannered, some parents left scraps for him. He accepted these offerings with dignity, never begging, never jumping. Margaret had grown fond of him too, though she'd never have admitted it in quite those terms. There was something comforting about his presence, his reliability. In a world that seemed to be fraying at the edges, she'd lost her husband. Gordon, 2 winters past, and her daughter lived clear. Across the country in Seattle, Atlas represented constancy. He was there every single morning, a silent guardian bearing witness to her route. This morning, though, something was different. The snow was heavy, yes, the first real accumulation of the season, and that changed things. Margaret drove more slowly, more carefully. She'd already collected 8 children from the first 2 stops. Their voices a cheerful cacophony behind her, excited by the snow, speculating about whether school might be cancelled tomorrow if it kept up. The bus's heater worked overtime, and the windows fogged despite her best efforts. As she approached the Kowalski driveway, she spotted him. Atlas sat at his usual position, but even from a distance, something about his posture struck her as wrong. His body was rigid, head lowered, and as the bus's headlights swept over him, she saw that he wasn't looking at the bus with his typical calm interest. He was staring at it with an intensity that made her grip the wheel a little tighter. "There's Atlas!" Little Henry Kowalski shouted from his seat, and the other children pressed toward the windows, waving and calling. Margaret eased the bus to a stop, air brakes hissing. The Kowalski twins, Lily and Ethan, 14 years, old and perpetually disheveled, trudged through the snow toward the door. But before Margaret could open it, Atlas moved. He stood and walked directly in front of the bus, positioning himself between the vehicle and the road ahead. Then he sat down again right in the middle of the lane and fixed his dark eyes on the windshield. On Margaret. "What's he doing?" Sophie asked, her voice uncertain. Margaret opened the door. "Atlas, move along now," she called, her voice kind but firm. "We've got to keep going." The dog didn't budge. The twins climbed aboard, stamping snow from their boots. "He's acting weird," Ethan observed, peering through the windshield. "Maybe he wants food," Lily suggested. But Margaret knew dogs, had grown up with them on her parents' farm. And this wasn't hunger or playfulness or even ordinary stubbornness. This was deliberate. Atlas remained planted in the road, his gaze never wavering from hers. She tried the horn, a gentle tap, nothing that would frighten him. He didn't flinch. "We're going to be late." Mrs. Holloway, one of the older children said, not unkindly. They had another 6 stops ahead and a schedule to keep. Margaret drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, feeling an unfamiliar prickle of unease. The logical choice was clear. Inch the bus forward slowly, and Atlas would move. Dogs always moved. But something in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't defiance. It was desperation. "Everyone stay seated," she said, and she stood, pulling her heavy coat tighter as she stepped down into the snow. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and clean. Her boots sank 3 inches into fresh powder as she walked around to the front of the bus. Atlas watched her approach but didn't retreat. Up close, she could see his body trembling, not from cold, but from the strain of whatever internal battle he was waging. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly, crouching down despite the protest in her knees. "What's wrong?" Atlas whined, a high, urgent sound she'd never heard from him before. Then he did something extraordinary. He stood, walked 3 paces forward down the road, looked back at her and barked once, sharp, commanding. He wanted her to follow. Every practical bone in Margaret's body screamed that this was foolish. She had a bus full of children, a schedule, responsibilities. The road ahead looked perfectly fine, just fresh snow, the same as everywhere else. But she'd learned in 67 years of living that there were moments when logic had to bow to instinct. "Stay on the bus," she called to the children, and she began walking forward, following Atlas. He led her perhaps 30 feet, to a spot where the road curved gently to the left and began a modest descent. Here he stopped and sat down again, looking at her with those impossibly expressive eyes. Margaret looked around, seeing nothing unusual at first, just snow and the dark silhouettes of pine trees lining the road, and wait, she stepped closer to the edge, where the road's shoulder dropped away into a shallow ravine. The snow here looked different, somehow smoother. She knelt again, brushing at it with her gloved hand, and felt her heart skip. Not ground, not solid. Ice? The snow had covered a sheet of black ice, invisible and deadly, stretching across the entire width of the road for at least 20 feet. If she'd driven the bus onto that surface, particularly with the weight of the vehicle and the downward slope, she'd have had no traction, no control. The bus would have slid inevitably toward that ravine. It wasn't a dramatic cliff, nothing that would make the evening news, but it was steep enough, rocky enough. At best, the bus would have tipped, children would have been hurt. At worst, Margaret's breath caught in her throat. She stood on shaking legs and looked back at Atlas, who sat patiently in the snow, watching her understand, waiting for her to accept what he'd been trying to tell her all along. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you good boy." 20 minutes later, after she'd carefully backed the bus up and radioed the district office, after the county road crew had been dispatched and confirmed what Atlas had somehow known after she'd rerouted the children safely to school via the longer highway route, Margaret sat in the driver's seat with tears running down her weathered cheeks. Atlas had followed the bus the entire alternate route, loping through the snow alongside them, and now waited outside the school as children disembarked. Sophie Chen had asked permission to hug him, and Margaret had said yes. One by one, the children filed past, touching his head, his shoulders, murmuring thanks they perhaps didn't fully comprehend yet. When the last child had gone inside, Margaret stepped down once more. Atlas sat calmly, snow gathering on his fur, steam rising from his panting breath. "You saved them," Margaret said quietly. "Saved us all." The dog's tail wagged once slowly, and he leaned his head briefly against her leg before turning and trotting away. Back toward Maple Ridge Road, back to whatever mysterious life he led when he wasn't guarding her route. Margaret watched him disappear into the white landscape, a dark shape growing smaller against the endless snow. That evening, the local news ran a story about the ice patch, about how a school bus full of children had narrowly avoided disaster thanks to an alert driver. Margaret had told them the truth, but they'd written it off as charming embellishment, a woman's fondness for a stray dog. Nothing more. But she knew. The children knew, and somewhere out in the cold, Atlas knew. The next morning, despite the snow still falling, he was there at his usual spot, sitting at the end of the Kowalski driveway, waiting. When the bus approached, Margaret stopped, opened the door, and met his eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. His tail thumped twice against the snowy ground, and when the bus pulled away, he followed as he always had, as he always would, a silent guardian whose loyalty required no recognition, whose vigilance asked for nothing in return. In a world that had forgotten how to listen, Atlas had spoken, and Margaret had heard. That, she reflected as she guided her precious cargo safely down the road, was a gift beyond measure, the reminder that wisdom wears many forms, that protection comes from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most profound acts of love are performed by those who cannot speak our language but who understand, perhaps better than we do ourselves, what it means to care for something worth protecting. The snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the world in white. And on Maple Ridge Road, a German shepherd kept pace with a yellow school bus, watching, always watching, faithful to a duty only he fully understood.